Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To our visitors, we are going to begin our meeting with the closed session portion of our agenda, so we don't step out.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll step out for a bit and then we'll be back. But I need a motion to adjourn into a recess to executive session. I'm sorry, talk about a motion to
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Make a motion we recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel, student matters, and litigation.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Open session. Welcome everyone. It is so nice to see you all here. We hope we have a good attendance, which is why we relocated this meeting from the regular board of education offices over here. So I'm glad to see you still. At this time, we will have our first opportunity for public comments. The school board welcomes questions, ideas, and comments from persons in attendance. Members of the audience may comment during the public comment portion of the meeting when recognized by the board president. We ask that comments be limited to 3 minutes in order to complete the agenda within a reasonable time. We also ask that comments begin by providing their name, address, and school list or community reside. Would anyone like to make a public comment at this time? All right, seeing none. Next up, we have celebrations from the December WGSD. David?
3 of us attended the acapella concert, so I'll just make mention of the fact that I was there. And it was wonderful.
And I got a CD that had a Sarah Addison solo or two on
Which is also wonderful.
it. And the Mr. Webster pageant was also really good. And I love that that's a student prepared, a student run event that raises money for the DECA trip to New York marketing class. And I'd like to commend Kara CB for having done that for so many years. It was really great. And there are so many holiday concerts going on, and I want to again say, I love our music program.
True.
And I also attended Mr. Webster and the Amen, which were both great. And Mr. Webster also raised money for the People Heart Foundation, which just only ended those. But both really, really well ran on it. So fun.
So, celebrations from administrators.
Kathy, you got some?
I can.
Yes. Trinity, how about you?
I'd like to, I'd like to commend the high school. They started a late night study session for the freshmen. They were prepared for finals this week. Want to move up?
Beautiful. Well, tonight we have a few different honors to give, and we had to get the board president's signature on a few of these, so we're still stuffing, but we will make sure to get you those letters. First, what we wanted to do was honor Ben Krasnoff. Ben is a student at Webster Groves High School, and this past go-around, Ben scored a perfect 36 on his ACT. 0.1% of people in the United States score that. It's one in about 2,500 kids nationwide, and it's a remarkable accomplishment. I told him it was way higher than I scored. He'd be embarrassed at the gap that I was a superintendent, but wanted to honor Ben tonight and just congratulate you. So. Pretty amazing. And Ben, do you want to take us a moment to introduce your special guest and any plans that you have in the future, moving towards college or anything?
Well, I'm probably going to be attending, I'm applying to several colleges in town. I'm hoping to stay in St. Louis. Probably studying something involving the environment or biology.
Excellent. Who's this nice lady you brought? Please, mine. Well, congratulations once again. We will have a special certificate for you. We also have a very unique celebration tonight that Representative Unsecker is also here to join me in, and I know there's a lot of people in the room that are here as well, and it's one where you try not to get emotional talking about it. I think the people in the room know that on the early morning of September 29th, that we had a pretty big fire out at Camp Lyman. And a lot of different people got woken up in different ways. I got not a frantic, but a call from Mr. Atterbury telling me that there was a fire and giving me details about the event, telling me that everybody was okay. We had a lot of parents and families that also got phone calls where we tried to reassure them up front that the kids were safe. But you can imagine, a lot of us, especially us with children or us that are adults, can imagine getting that phone call and still wondering and still wanting I want to see my child. We had campers and we had high school counselors that were in Kamens that were told about a fire and that they needed to get out real quick and we had to move to safety. And they did this as a lot of alarms were sounding. There was 5 different departments that were represented out there for this particular fire. And you can imagine the fury that existed there. And then we had 2 cabins, cabin 5 and 6, that they woke up to the fire and being in those particular cabins. And their awakening was probably the most extreme and shocking of all. There was a lot of people from that night and from the weeks that followed that have responded extraordinarily well to the trauma. Because we know it was a very traumatic event for all that experienced it. We know it was traumatic even for the families that weren't there, but they're experiencing it with their children, and we know if we have children, how everything that our children feel, we feel that much more deeply, as opposed to if it just happened to us. A lot of different people that have been involved at the school levels to help kids through the experience and the such. But tonight we're here to honor the kids, the high school counselors who, above all, were the absolutely extraordinary heroes of that particular event. That includes the 3, Natalie, Hannah, and Phoebe, who rescued the kids, saved the kids, literally saved the kids. I think some people don't recognize that how bad the fire actually was. You think fire, sometimes you see the structure still. It was pretty bad. And these kids responded so beautifully, amazingly, got the kids out to safety. Hannah's running around, getting adults, falling, hurting herself. And then, following it, we had 8 high school students, young ladies, who demonstrated extraordinary care, extraordinary leadership, remained calm in the situation to care for a lot of 6th grade students. It was remarkable. They are remarkable, and they are definitely worthy of that title of hero. And tonight we're here to celebrate them and celebrate just the life, their life, celebrate the lives that they saved, celebrate the care that they demonstrated to these kids. And they continue to demonstrate by going to Steger, checking in with these kids, having lunch with these kids. It's really pretty remarkable. We have tremendous gratitude for them. And it's important to know that, while we don't know, we'll probably never know why the fire occurred out at Camp Lyman, despite all of the investigation and everything that's been done. That uncertainty will probably always exist. But the certainty that will exist is the extraordinary gratitude and thankfulness for the high school students. That you guys, it's eternal. It's forever. You've impacted all of us. You've impacted those students who will never forget. And you've impacted their families in ways that you will always be remembered. You will always be thanked. And so tonight what we want to do is we want to honor them. We have something special to give them a certificate. And we also have a special proclamation from Representative Unsicker. So.
Thank you. Yes, I brought proclamations from the Missouri House of Representatives for the girls' resolutions, and I will read you one. They are all pretty similar. This one is for Peyton. Whereas the members of the Missouri House of Representatives proudly pause to recognize those outstanding young Missouri citizens who have distinguished themselves as leaders of their peers. And whereas Peyton McGinnis and the other young ladies of St. Louis, Missouri are to be commended for the courage and bravery they demonstrated recently while serving as camp counselors at Camp Wyman in Eureka. And whereas during the early morning hours of September 29, 2017, a fire broke out at Camp Wyman that ultimately destroyed 2 cabins. And whereas, thanks to the quick thinking and decisiveness of 3 Webster Groves High School students serving as counselors in those cabins, the 13 Steger 6th grade center students sleeping in the cabins were able to safely escape the burning structures. And whereas, in addition to tending to the physical safety of the campers, these 3 counselors, along with the 5 other high school students serving as counselors to the Steger girls, demonstrated a high level of care and concern for the Steger students and for the adults with whom they experienced this traumatic event. And whereas an exemplary student at her high school, Peyton McGinnis, and the other young ladies have been blessed with the love and support of their proud parents. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the members of the Missouri House of Representatives, 99th General Assembly, join in expressing our utmost appreciation to Peyton McGinnis and to these other young ladies for their heroism and for the care they demonstrated both that night at Camp Wyman and in the days that followed when reconnecting with the Steger students. And be it further resolved that the Chief Clerk of the Missouri House of Representatives be instructed to prepare a properly inscribed copy of this resolution as a mark of our esteem for them. So I have this for Peyton. I have this for Natalie. And for Elizabeth Matternack. And for Holland Peterson. Not here. And for Ainsley Stewart. To apologize, we had some frames that broke, so I wasn't able to put some in frames, so I will get you frames next week. But I have one for Emily, Eileen, and for Hannah Bowman. Phoebe. Hold on to those and get you those in frames when I have those. I can do that.
I want to give the young ladies also an opportunity, kind of like we did for Ben, to share something, anything that you like, whether it's just introducing. Please, somebody's here that you want to call out and just thank that they're here. Please feel comfortable doing that. If you want to share anything, next steps for any of you, that's fine. Anything you want to say. So let's start with, who wants to start? Anybody? Maybe just acknowledge your loved ones that are here. Natalie, would you do that?
Yeah. My family's back there. My mom and dad and sister.
Thank you. Phoebe?
Okay, so my family's right here. My mom, my dad, and my little brother.
Thank you. Yeah.
This is my family over here. My aunt, my dad, my brother, my mom, and my grandmother. These are my parents.
Great. Elizabeth?
This is my dad, my mom.
once again, thank you. Thank you to the families. Thank you for sharing your girls with us. Girls, again, thank you so much. I know that there's a lot of Steger staff who are out there with you. We're here to celebrate you as well. Some of the parents of the children that you cared for. Some of the different high school people and other people that have supported you along the way too. So we all wrap our arms around you and can't thank you enough. So thank you very much.
Thank you again, Joel. Congratulations. And as an additional reward, we will let you leave the Board of Education meeting. Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you too, Representative Munson.
Yes, thank you.
Really good.
Okay, next up on our agenda is the board calendar. I'll draw your attention to a couple of items. First of all, tomorrow is the candidate filing open for Board of Education. So if anybody's interested in running for election to the board, there are 2 seats open. That is tomorrow. We have a January 6th board retreat on everybody's calendar from 8:30 to 11:30 a.m. One thing that's not on our calendar for January is a board committee engagement session. I think we decided we were going to for December and January. It's not on there. We have a retreat that first weekend. So do we want to push it back to February? Do we want to find out if we want to do it that Sunday? I'm open to suggestions.
I was wondering, since we don't have a meeting on January 8th, a normal Monday meeting, maybe we could do an off-site meeting then.
Okay.
What do you think? If we did 6:30, somewhere like Bucky's or,
Would just be 3 of us.
just 3 of us, not a meeting, so just to publicize that it's an opportunity to talk informally with board members. I think it's worth a try.
Okay. Do we have 3 who are available January 8th?
I could do it January 8th. And I could work on location with the other 2 entrants.
Okay, so Jean, did I hear somebody else? I know, it's kind of hard. I think I can do it too. So maybe put down Jean, Joe, me, you, yes, the 4 of us, and we'll figure out which we will go in the middle.
It's currently at the central office.
Anybody have anything else on the calendar? Cross up. All right, if not, reports from superintendent and staff.
First up, we have Mr. Joel Oliver from the foundation. Not necessarily staff, but Joel, there's a on switch there if it's not on.
Hello. So I talked to Dr. Simpson. We talked a lot about foundation stuff and suggested, we're doing a lot. It probably makes sense to kind of have a broader conversation. When I rotated off the board, Dr. Rest at the time suggested, maybe talk to the foundation folks, see if there's an opportunity there. So I did that about a year and a half ago, I guess. And I was a little embarrassed to say, whenever I'm talking to teachers, I say this, I'm a little embarrassed to say, having been a Webster resident for 13 years, this is Liz's 17th year, I think, teaching at Hickson, 3 kids in the district, and having been on the board, I didn't really know very much about the foundation when I started, which is kind of a travesty, honestly. I think that it's something that not a lot of folks know about. So going into the school year, I became president of the foundation. We have an entirely new board. And really the objective has been, we're going to look at every single thing that's being done why it's being done, how it's being done, and how can we maybe do it differently, how can we do it better, and not to do things different for the sake of doing them differently, but to try to be more effective at what we're doing. And so we distilled that down, right, like any organization does, and go, it's really simple. We do two things. We raise money, and we give money to teachers. It's not terribly complicated. And how can we do those two things more effectively? So we started having conversations with teachers, with administrators, with families in the district. And there was this kind of a couple of recurring themes that came up. I don't have $1 million to give to your foundation, so I'm not interested. I can't really contribute. Which I think is pretty common in society. People hear a foundation and you think that it's, if it's not estate planning, you don't have a part to play. And we heard from a lot of teachers that said, I don't really understand, it sounds like a lot of work, the same people get the things, I don't care, I'm not interested, being a teacher's hard. So we said, okay, how can we do all of this better, right? This is a huge asset. So we worked really hard at that. I would say what is on the screen there, the Venn diagram that we've been working on, is really the culmination of what we've been working through. Is that you have the school district in a very small, tight community that we're all in, and everybody's asking for money all the time. Everybody. In Webster, St. Louis, Missouri, nationally, everybody wants your dollar. But when you look at the school community as a whole, we said, what dollar are we asking for? There's really three primary groups asking for money. You have what we're doing at the foundation, you have what the Alumni Association is doing, and you have what the school PTOs are doing. And everybody does it really well, but nobody was making this distinction. If you come to me as a parent and as a community member and ask for my dollar, you should be able to intelligently ask why you want my dollar, and what are you going to do with my dollar? And we didn't really feel like anybody was articulating that very well. So we've been working with the PTOs, we've been working with the Alumni Association to say, let's work together. I don't want every dollar. When we go out there and fundraise, not every dollar is for us. Not every dollar is for the Alumni Association. But if you don't intelligently articulate why you're asking it, then consumers, all of us, can't really make that decision. And we feel like we're making some headway there, helping people understand. An example would be the Alumni Association is out there talking to people that graduated decades ago, and they're fundraising for a capital campaign. And you may have people say, I don't want to give my money to a capital campaign. I want to give money to really effectuate learning in the classroom. Well, there has to be a relationship there for them to connect those people to us, for us to really do that. And I think we're making great headway in broadening those horizons. Dr. Simpson's been really instrumental in kind of navigating this because he's the one person that's touching all of the groups. So this is really critical. We're pushing this out there more and more as we talk to groups. As we go and talk to PTOs, we're doing this. An example would be the foundation used to give the PTOs a grant every year. We're not doing that anymore. For this reason. Let's work together. Let's direct the dollars to each other, but let's be really intentional in what we're doing. And so we think we're making some headway there. So as you guys are interacting with the people in the community, I think it's really important that you understand this. And as Dr. Simpson knows, we're iterating through this all the time. There's not a final copy of this. Every time we talk to a group, there's some tweak that comes out of it. There's some wordsmithing, some little thing. And that's how it should be, and that's what I want it to be. So we really would welcome any of your feedback on that as we go forward. We're instituted a 1-year, 3-year, and a 5-year plan for the foundation. If you really want to get down to brass tacks, the finances of the foundation, we're not planned in a forward-thinking way. We were basically deficit spending, which nobody here probably knows. And looking at that, we want a sustainable group. We want to be able to provide longer than just the next couple of years. So we're working towards that. We're no longer allocating grant dollars based on a budget that's a year ahead of time. It's nimble and it's in real time. If fundraising is not working, then we're not giving as much money away. So that's been really important. It's important to articulate that to people, especially as you go out there and talk to larger granting bodies that really want to know what your plan is. Like, how are you going to use our dollars if we endow this money to you? So that's been important. The thing that's really been kind of personal for me that I think has been extremely meaningful is how we're interacting with teachers. And it's not just teachers, it's teachers, administrators, and students, because we actually get grants from all 3 of those groups, and how we're doing that process and making it as completely transparent as it could possibly be. We've now instituted a mandatory step in the process. Before a teacher writes a grant, they have a 5-minute form they fill out that just pre-flights their idea to us. And we tell them, it takes more than 5 minutes. Don't take more than 5 minutes. So that when we see your idea, we can say, well, 4 people have asked us. Like, don't spend 20 hours writing a grant, make these tweaks. I think that's been really meaningful. We've also switched the scoring process is now completely blind to the grants committee. So when people on the grants committee are scoring a grant from a teacher, they do not know who the teacher is and they don't know what building it came from. So grants are being purely scored on the merits of what's being asked for, which I think is really important. We listened to what our teachers said, and before there's only ever been 1 major grant cycle. In the spring, there's now 2. We just had our first round for the fall. And teachers were ecstatic because they said, I had an idea and now I'll have those dollars I can actually implement in the second semester. So trying to be nimble and hearing their feedback. Becky Hauser is our one employee, and she really manages the development outreach piece. She has taken the social media outlet and really kind of blown that up on Facebook and Twitter and on the website and Instagram. And that's been very successful. It reaches a lot of people. So if you guys don't like us on any of those things, please do like us and share. It's important to touch folks. In the vein of not just doing things because it's the way I've always done them, we're looking at every single event we do. Every time we're touching the community, we're asking, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it the way we're doing it? How can we do it better? Should we not do it? There's no sacred cows. We're doing that event because we've always done that event. We're not doing the golf event this year. There's just strategic reasons that didn't make sense. So, Sip and Saber was the event that we just had to replace the golf tournament. The final number was it raised $65,300. That one event raised more money than we gave away all of last year, which was pretty astounding. And we saw more money come in. We talked about the Venn diagram. We also, this is the second year we actually have PTO liaisons from every building attend our meetings, I think every 3 months. So we have that direct line into the schools and they're reporting back, and that's actually been very helpful. So I guess what we would ask from you, so it's nice to have an ask, would be twofold. Think about this, really do take 2 minutes to read it. And if you read this, not only as a board member, but as a community member, as a parent, if there's something that can make this more effective with somebody, tell me. Shoot me an email, because that's what we're looking for on this. For everybody. If anybody has any feedback, give us feedback. And then second of all, we're really trying to break down this image of not being an approachable organization. And I was surprised to learn that districts are all different. Kirkwood's foundation is part of the district. You know, we're not part of the district. We're totally separate, which means the way we do things are different than the way they do things. You know, Ladue does it differently than we do it. And we want to be approachable to everybody. And there's very different reasons, right? If you have a kid at Bristol, you care to give that dollar because you're going to see that dollar in their classroom. You know, if you have a graduate and it was, you saw how the school system changed their lives, you may support it for that reason. If you've never had kids or it's been a long time ago, you may just want your property values to stay high because we have a good school district. They're all valid reasons, but we want the organization to be approachable. So, I think it's important for us to all understand the resource we have and how to make it better. So, that was all my notes. Let's make that I took notes. Are there any questions about any of that or any feedback? I'm happy to connect with any of you later. Do you have anything to add to any of that kind of in your?
I don't think so. The thing that I really like about the foundation is that you're modeling what you promote, and that's kind of that innovation kind of gets caught up, but you're thinking forward, and like you said, there are no sacred cows, and you're not just change for the sake of change, but you're evaluating everything and making changes where changes are necessary. And no, I think the foundation's doing an amazing job. I like what your leadership has done, what Becky's done, what the group has done, and it's a lot of people, just like in our schools, that are dedicating an extraordinary amount of time to benefit our children in their learning. And they're not getting paid for it, like the people who sit up here. But Doug, he's the only one who gets paid. But anyway, I can't thank you enough. Well, I can pay you too. I can. But we can take care of that. Right. No, but you're doing great stuff.
Yeah, I'll say one of the hardest things when I was on the board, when we were really looking at innovation, was the exact same thing that we struggled with, is the word innovation is in our mission statement that we fund innovative learning in the classroom. And, we have a marginally intelligent group of people on our board, trying to work hard. Most of them are smarter than me. And, we'll be in a serious meeting and a teacher or an administrator, well, what does innovation mean? What does innovative learning? I don't want to spend 20 hours writing a grant that you're not going to award because it's not innovative. It's not a defined term that I don't understand. I want you to fund this widget, but you don't want to fund this widget because you funded a widget last year. And we had a real breakthrough kind of aha moment that innovation is not about the thing, it's about what you're doing with the thing. And that's really resonated with kind of the teacher population. It's like, you can ask for the widget. And historically it's been, no, like, you did a widget, you don't get a widget. It's not one widget. But if you go, yeah, but they were doing this thing and I'm doing that thing, then people have understood, oh, that's the innovation piece. The innovation piece is the idea. So it's important to remember if people ask you. So,
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you for this information. I knew some of this, but not all of it, about the changes in the foundation, and it sounds like you guys are really. What are you all doing, if you can communicate these changes and seek feedback and put all of that from the school district community, for instance, different parent groups?
Yeah, so we've done a couple of things. So the PTO liaisons have been a big piece of it. They actually do a very good job taking really detailed notes of the meetings and reporting back. We've gone to all of the PTO meetings once this year since we started doing all of this, and we'll continue to do that. We went to the administrators meeting and presented to all the building administrators to let them know. And we're just having ongoing dialogues. When I run into folks from the buildings, we're just very open and talking about these things. And being very clear, like, this is a nimble process. We are not perfect. We are not going to solve these things. We are going to keep changing it to make it better, to be more transparent, to do things that are completely out in the open.
I really appreciate, for instance, that the grant selection process is one now. I did not realize it wasn't always one of things. Obviously, it will make sense to us.
Yeah.
That's great. And if there's anything else that we can do to support you, please.
I would just echo that what you said tonight was what the liaison said at the PTO meeting. This was presented, so kudos to that communication because it got through.
Good. That's what you hope for.
I brought you being present when you did the grants for the first cycle, and I just want to reiterate what you're saying, that it was, in terms of the way the decisions were made, I really got a sense that there was some differences there. You really were trying to think about it in the terms that you had. And it meant that there were some things that in the past somebody might have expected to get funded, that we came back and said, no, this really doesn't fit in. But I think between the two-stage process, the way you went through it, I was very impressed with the way that all of that was conducted.
Okay, well, thank you guys. We appreciate it. Just like the whole process, we expect this to be an ongoing dialogue. So we'll just continue doing it. So, thanks.
Thank you. All right, next up, Mr. Element.
We are reordering the furniture, otherwise we order this straight line straight to you. G6 looking at the back of my head.
Thank you, and good evening. In front of you tonight, that was in your board materials in advance of the meeting, for your consideration are a small number of adjustments to the district's 2017-18 budget. These adjustments can be characterized as mid-course corrections of sorts, which essentially represent both the last step in the 2017-18 budget process and the first step in the 2018-19 budget development process. These adjustments are needed generally for my experience has been for 4 different kinds of reasons. You can lead to the need for a budget adjustment. Some adjustments are routine. Some reflect information that has changed that has changed. Sometimes you get it wrong, and we have to say we were wrong and we need to adjust the budget, and sometimes it's a reflection of a problem. I'm pleased to report this evening that while we have a few routine budget adjustments and a change this evening, there weren't any wrongs and we don't have any problems in the budget. There are no unexpected surprises, so to speak. In fact, other than adjustments to record the favorable full-day kindergarten decision, a routine carryover of unspent building budgets and capital projects budgets, and a routine truing up of the self-funding, the self-balancing student activity accounts, that the net impact of all of the remaining adjustments other than those three is less than $300. In fact, if it wasn't for those three primary budget adjustments, we probably wouldn't even have approached the board with proposed adjustments. What that means, in other words, is that the district's original budget remains solid, and this really is evidenced as much by what is not being adjusted, by what is being adjusted. Specifically, you might note that the district's primary revenue source, property taxes, the district gets about 2/3 of its operating resources from that single source alone, is not being adjusted. At the same time, the district's major expense category, which is salary and benefits, over 80% of the district's budget is represented by salary and benefits. Those are not being adjusted either. Instead, the proposed adjustments can really be summarized by this table. And we start with the first column being last year's actual results. And I just included the accounts that are changing this year. Those all fit on one page, so it's very manageable. And that first column is what the actual revenues or expenditures, as the case might be, were for last fiscal year, the 16-17 fiscal year. And then the second column represents what the district's original budget was for 17-18 in each of those accounts. And then there's a number of columns in between. The first column is full-day kindergarten. So that change resulted in changes to the sales tax line of $141,000 increase in our sales tax Prop C revenue projection. An increase in interest because of the interest that the state was paid to pay the district on the funds of $105,000. A refund that will be going out to the parents, and the impact on state funding, state foundation formula for a net positive impact on the district's budget of $818,000. We had unspent building budgets and capital projects budgets totaling $805,000. And then student activities based on last year's actual revenue and expenses in the student activity accounts. We felt like we needed to bump up those to recognize what the historical trend has been. Those are self-funding accounts through fundraisers and so forth, and require no operating fund contributions from the district. And so that's a self-funding increase of $250,000 for revenues and $250,000 for expenditures. And then everything else is in the all other category, and you can see a total of a net increase in revenues of $16,500, a net increase in expenditures of $16,214. So the impact on the district's net surplus or net operating results is less than $300. The grand total of the full-day kindergarten, the carryover, student activity adjustments, and the grand total of all of the adjustments that are being proposed is a slight positive impact of almost $90,000 on the district's budget. We had originally projected a $990,000 surplus. That surplus is now increased to $1,080,000, so a $90,000 increase in that projected surplus for this year. So at this point, I would be happy, you've had the materials since last week to look them over. I would be happy to respond to any questions that there might be.
Why is there carryover on instructional supplies? Was it because there weren't new textbooks or something being ordered?
The instructional supplies, that represents the building budget carryover. We just put it all in the instructional supply category for budget adjustment purposes. The buildings will be given the opportunity to take that carryover and reallocate it into the accounts that would line up with the plans that they have submitted. Those buildings, if you recall, one of the requirements of the carryover process for the buildings is if they're carrying over more than 15% of their budgets, they had to submit a plan for what they were accumulating those budget surpluses for at the building level. We found that those plans for those buildings that were carrying over more than 15% were primarily concentrated in computers and instructional equipment, furniture, some professional development as well. We put it all in the instructional supply category, and then the buildings will be given the opportunity to move that to a professional development account or an equipment account if that's what they're going to be using it for.
I just want to make sure nobody thinks that we're cutting in that area.
Yeah.
And that was a big shift from the prior year, of course, because in the past we had to spend our money by a certain time frame, and we wanted to use their money as well as wise as they could to support kids in their learning, and so we said with plan they could roll over the money. So they've been really appreciative of it. And great.
I think it's worked very well. Yeah, it was a wise move.
Thank you very much.
There's a motion in front of you to approve. We do have to divide this up for state compliance purposes into by fund, so the general fund, the teacher's fund, capital projects, so all of that has been included in your materials that you had and incorporated into the motion that was
Copy of the motion handy, and I can read it.
It's all the recommended action.
Yes.
Above the block text, above the paragraph.
It's right above the block in your board docs, or if you've got a
Okay, all right. Okay, move the Board of Education approve the proposed adjustments consisting of $1,167,052 increase in revenues and a $1,077,080 increase in expenditures. The Webster Roads School District 2017-18 budget, resulting in the adjusted budgets by fund as indicated herein.
Seconded, all those in favor? Aye. Thank
Dr. Denbo, did you get to upload the newest slides in here, or should they note that there's going to be a few different ones?
I've added a few after some questions came up after it was released, so the updated report will be uploaded tomorrow morning to Board Docs. All right, well, thank you. I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk to you about not only the successes and share some of our celebrations, but also talk about the needs of our districts and the next steps that we'll be taking in order to try and meet the needs in order for all of our students to be successful. So I'm going to start with some celebrations. There's a lot listed here. One of the things that I'd like to take a moment and talk to you about is the last bullet point, the revised high school course guide. When talking about equity and the needs of our kids, one of the things that came up during our conversations was how the structure of classes were set up for students, and specifically about some of the prerequisites that had been just over the course of time have been developed for students, as far as that might be a boundary for some of our students. As we're talking about, you must have this class before going to this class, or must have a grade, and specifically a grade in order to advance on to another class. Now, there's some prerequisites that are non-negotiable. You need to take Art 1 before you take Art 2. There's some of those that obviously maintain. But what we tried to do with the help of the administration at the high school, and Angela Thompson has been very key to this, as well as the other assistant principals and Dr. Clark, in talking with the departments, looking at how the course catalog is written, so that rather than a prerequisite, it's reworded as far as recommendation. So students know that there isn't that barrier that's been put up that might have been there before. The other side to that is when students are signing up for classes, especially in the core content areas, they do that with the help of the teachers and the recommendation of the teachers. And for some, there's always been this known that if a student or a family disagrees with a recommendation that a teacher has, that they can have that conversation and sign up for the class that they want to sign up for. Part of this, again, when you're talking about equity, is trying to make that much more transparent for all of our students, so that having our students have a voice in the core content classes that they're signing up for. So that's not one of those hidden rules that some people know about and not others. So we're trying to, there's lots of layers when you come to course selection and course catalog. This is the first step in having the students take a little bit more ownership in those classes is a celebration. So this is the first step of a larger conversation. I wanted to celebrate the work of the high school administration and teachers. On this slide, I want to point out I want to highlight the partnerships that were developed last year with the Webster University, the Real World Problem Solving Survivor. That is one of the classes, that's one of the new classes that you will see in the consent agenda for the new course catalog. But that is a partnership class. It's a class that's offered with Webster University, and they're going to offer it with our students as well. But it really talks about ethics and philosophy around the idea of global poverty. And so our students will be taking the class and using the same syllabus that the college students will be using. They'll be taking the class in tandem. And they will be culminating with a trip to the Heifer Ranch in Arkansas, both our students and the students at Webster University. When Dr. Clark was going around talking to the students several weeks ago about the opportunities for next year, he said that this brought a lot of energy. There was a lot of excitement about this class, so we're excited about this opportunity for our students. The second partnership that happened this past year was around our summer school practicums. And when we were revising our summer school program, which we've already talked about earlier in the school year, for our elementary students, we were anticipating that we would have a lot of students signing up, which would require a lot of adult support. So we were trying to figure out a way to develop that adult support. So in talking with the education department at Webster University, we always focus on, we have a lot of practicum and student teachers coming through Webster University, but with this particular situation, we highlighted those students early on that would be completing their practicum over the summer, and we provided them with the same professional development that we give our staff who are teaching summer school. So they got to participate alongside with our staff with our staff professional development, and then in return, they completed their practicum over the and helped with our summer school, the full course of summer school. So we got the best of both worlds. They got additional professional development that they wouldn't normally have, We built that tie with Webster University, and then we had the adult support for our students. So I wanted to tell you a couple, show you a couple of pictures and tell you a little bit of a few stories of what's going on in the district. The photo on the left is a group of students working with Candy Buckman and Kendall Olson at the computer school. This project, this was a project-based learning project, this all stemmed from an initial trip to the Webster Rock Hill Webster Kirkwood Times, Webster Kirkwood Times, and they toured the office. And out of that, they started talking about reporting and points of view. And so the students were asked to find out what they needed in their, if they had to make a change in their playground. That was interesting for them. And they were brainstorming in this picture the opposite point of view of what they were taking. So it was teaching them how to think through someone else's lens. From that, they wrote articles and letters to the editor and created their own newspaper. And next week, they're going to have their a coffee shop for the parents to come in so they can read their newspapers at the students. So it really is a sign of that community, that community connection that goes with our vision. And it all started from a field trip through Webster Kirkwood Times. The second picture is shows a little bit of the work behind what's going on at Hickson 8th grade ELA classes. They just finished their historical fiction book talks or book clubs. They were focusing on a specific time period, and students were given the choice of a specific book that they could read. And from that, the students worked on literary essays that all tied in with that historical time period. Next, on the left, we have the wonderful new makerspace at the high school. Just in the last couple of weeks, the high school staff have had the opportunity to receive a lot of professional development to go with that makerspace. The staff is very excited about the opportunities, not only for the classes that will be offered for that space, but the opportunities that they as teachers will have to use the equipment within that space. On the right, you'll see a picture. This is Carrie Cole's class at Avery. A student is giving a mini lesson to their classmates about something that they're passionate about. And this is tied to Lucy Coffin's units of reading and writing around informational text. So the kids were learning about how to read informational text and how that's different from fiction. And through that came all of the students getting the opportunity. Carrie modeled what a mini lesson looks like. And so all the students had the opportunity to give a mini lesson to their classmates, and the classmates gave some feedback about the topics that interest them. And the last one I want to highlight is, this is Denise Foley and Shannon Marks at Hudson. This is a novel engineering project. So novel engineering takes a novel. Denise read the novel Violet the Pilot to the class, and every book has some sort of conflict or problem. So out of that book, the students brainstormed the problems that were presented in the book and possible solutions to the problem. The extension that was unique is that they then built the solutions to the problem that they had brainstormed using the design thinking process. So they brainstormed, they created a prototype, students gave peer feedback and suggestions, they would go back and revise their projects and continued that cycle until final project. So you'll see that they were creating a balloon to help them transport them from the problem within the book. So that's another project that I'd like to celebrate. with all of the great things going on in the district, there are some things that we need to continue to work on, especially when talking about all of our students, but especially our students of color and those students who live in poverty. Our achievement, we want to see an improvement in our achievement in our standardized testings, math, ACT. We are continuing to work on our implementation of NWEA. We're in our second year of implementation in talking with the group from NWEA. And I've outlined my vision of a 3-year process because it's such a weighty, a meaty process. They feel like we're right on track to rolling it out slowly. So we are on our second year of implementation of that. Out of that comes how we as a district utilize the RTI, response to intervention process, to make sure that we are progress monitoring and looking at the needs of all of our students who might be struggling within our system. We are focusing our work with our administrative staff and our administrative staff with their staffs about how to utilize data and make data-driven decisions for the betterment of our students. And there's other things you can see there. One of the things that is new this year is the development with the passage of the dyslexia legislation several years ago. That is mandated to start next school year. We still do not have final recommendations from DESE. That's expected to be released by the end of this month. But there is a consortium of districts that we are working with, local districts, because we're all working together about screening, implementation, and ideas as far as making sure that this process is in place for the start of next school year. Some of the PD to focus that we're using or that we're completing or will be completing in the future to focus on these areas. We will be bringing the Columbia Teachers College for units of writing. I'm sorry, I should say units of reading and writing this coming summer. We're sending all of our, at least one of our reading specialists in each of our schools to Orton Gillingham training to be fully trained for the dyslexia legislation and for implementing the strategies to meet the needs of students who will be screened and identified for dyslexia. We're continuing with our work and providing professional development around NWEA. When talking in the previous slide about data-driven decision-making, we have a commitment from almost all of our schools. There was one school that was not in attendance in this meeting, and I'll still be talking with them, but the rest of the schools in participating in the Missouri Professional Learning Communities Consortium at Academy. And so I have a meeting actually on Wednesday with Ed Plus to see what, getting that set up for our schools for the upcoming school year. We're excited about that. We're bringing the Buck Institute again this summer and having them work with some of the teachers who have already gone through the training for intermediate training, so they'll have some deeper understanding. And we're continuing our work with our social justice cohort. We've sent a second group, we've sent 2 groups to the analyzing and dismantling systemic racism workshops. We have a meeting coming up with the group that puts on those workshops to bring that organization to our district more for next school year, for specific schools, but also for the district as a whole. We're hoping to send another group to the Washington University STEM cohort. And last month, we sent a large group, about 17 or 18 people, to the Trauma Informed Care Conference. And we're having those conversations along with John M., with our administrators and our counseling staff about the needs of students who have experienced some sort of trauma in their lives. So going through some of the data, this is our math and ELA data for the spring 2017 testing session. Because of the problems that occurred with the English 2 and Algebra 1 EOC tests in the spring, those tests were removed from the overall achievement, which skews the results from previous years. So once again, we can't really compare. It's apples and oranges. That's why it's not on a graph. But you can see the math performance index and the percentage advanced and proficient of those different subgroups. This year, just as a point of reference, we're getting yet again another new math test and another new ELA test for all of our students, because this is the first year of implementation of the new Missouri Learning Standards. So some of the revision work for the curriculum has been going on, but previous tests still tested the old standards, and this year will be the start of the new standards. We're also in the process of realigning when we give the Algebra 1 EOC because of this change in the new standards. For the next 2 years, we will continue to test the students who took Algebra 1 in 7th and 8th grade and took the Algebra 1 EOC. We'll take the Algebra 2 EOC in high school, and we'll give Algebra 1 to any EOC to any new students to the district who haven't tested yet. But starting in 1920, we'll be giving the Algebra 1 EOC only at the high school, and we'll be giving it at the end of the first semester of Algebra 2 because of the alignment of the new standards and where our curriculum is. That will be meeting the needs of our students. That'll be the best way to meet the needs of our students. Looking at our science data, we test science in 5th grade, 8th grade, and high school biology. We saw a slight increase in our overall achievement in our African American students this year. This year, again, with all the new standards, there's a cycle of revision of all of the assessments as well. So this year will be a new science assessment, but all of the items will be field tested. So we won't get data back from that, and we'll get data starting next school year. So we're going to have a couple of years of math and EOC data that's going to be a little bit different than it has in the past. We saw a nice improvement in our social studies math data for overall, and then also in our subgroups, either the highest or the second highest in the past 8 years. Again, looking at our curriculum and looking at our, at the high school level, our EOCs, we're in the process of realigning when we give the American Government EOC, looking at the standards within our curriculum and the standards that are measured on the EOC. We're moving that to the end of American history, because the way our curriculum is outlined is American government in action is kind of like, and so using that historical take and bringing the government into that will meet those needs. So we'll be giving the EOC test to our juniors, and it's very similar to the algebra realignment. So this year and next year we'll be just testing the students who are new to the district or who have not tested before they graduate, and then starting in 1920, we'll be testing all of the juniors in American history.
The data fluctuates so much. African American social studies data is very similar to 2015, but it was way down to 2016. Can you explain why there are always these anomalies?
I can't. But you can see that for overall achievement and even for all three subgroups, there was a dip. So whether it was a change in the test and the format, I really don't know for sure. We don't get an item analysis for the EOC, so it's hard to determine if we were missing a content strand or if we need to do something work with our curriculum. So I don't have a good answer to that. Then just going quickly, the next several slides are around our APR report. You can see that we have a high percentage of our students graduating. We had an increase when looking at our subgroup of students in poverty graduating, so we had a nice increase there. Looking at attendance, our overall percentage of students who are at school at least 90% of the time is high, but there is a gap between our African American students and our students in poverty, and so we do need to do some work on bridging that gap and finding that connection for our students. When students have that connection to school, they'll come to school and attendance will improve. Moving forward, we see the highest percentage ever of African American students and students in poverty scoring at or above the state levels on the ACT, SAT, or for us, ASVAB, we didn't have any students taking the Compass test. So that is a celebration. The percentage of students who earn a qualifying score on the AP test, we saw a nice increase in the percentage of students in poverty who had a qualifying score over the year before, a 10% increase. So that is a celebration as well.
Just for next time you present it, might be useful to have the numbers of students who are actually taking the test as well.
The numbers taking the test?
Yes.
This represents, okay.
So this is the percentage who are achieving the grade book. So it's the number at least who are actually taking the test is increasing, or the student population is staying about the same. And the number of students from these groups who are actually increasing, it suggests we're sort of penetrating sort of better.
I can
9
check.
out of 12 or 90 out of.
Yeah, that's exactly what I get. And just for next time, I was looking for this, just as you, the next time you present it.
I can tell you in 2016 and 17, all juniors did take the ACT, so that represents the entire, that entire cohort. So, and the numbers are, looking at that, I can't speak to it specifically, but I know they're in the 200s in previous years because I was looking at that in preparation. So there is a discrepancy, but it's not a huge gap, and I'll do that for next. We always have a high percentage of our graduates who successfully go into some post-secondary education or training or enter the military. And so overall, we had 98% of our students who completed that, our graduates.
Again, the number of actually 98% of students.
This chart represents the highest average composite score for our graduating seniors. So for last year's graduating group, our highest composite score was 23.6. And you can see the comparison for Missouri and for the nation. No, I'll put numbers. Put number signs. The SAT has been completely revised, so there's no year-to-year comparison data. In the past, there were only 2 subtests, or I'm sorry, there were 3 subtests, now there's only 2. But you can see how we compare with Webster Groves, the state and the national scores on those 2 subtests. We had 35, the number is in We had 35 students.
Now, I know this has got a very small population.
Yeah. And that's pretty typical from in the past. This represents our AP scores for our students who are in advanced placement classes. So this might be a little confusing, but I was trying to compare 2016 to 2017. The number in parentheses is the number of students who are actually enrolled in those classes. So the number before it is the number of students who took the test in comparison to the numbers of students who are enrolled in those classes. Then you can see the comparison of the average test score for 16 and 17 and the percentage of students who scored 3 or higher in comparison for 16 and 17.
Just a comment. It is sad to see all the students who are taking US history, so few are actually going and taking the test. And there are a number of comments from my students as they were passing through that lead me to believe that I'm not surprised to see that. And I mean, there was the...
Some of those courses are also dual credit, though, correct?
US
They might be
history-
getting college credit even though they're not taking the
US
test.
history, you can get credit through Uncle Workers.
But still, there was still a general feeling that the children who were doing that, there was no encouragement to go and do it. Yeah, and it was, well, yeah, you're probably right.
That's my
I think it's such a great opportunity between either the UNSL credit or these other things, or just going and doing the AP. There's very little downside for going and doing it. We had a mindset that the children who were there who were doing this, we tried to make sure that any of them could went ahead and did this. I do think it would be positive in terms of, you know, for that band of students. So again, let's try without making it so that it's. I don't want the children who are going to find it difficult to feel pressured or felt like now or whatever at the same time. Let's try to sort of stretch. If there are opportunities to stretch them for excellence, let's try to do that.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's going to be a little bit of a culture shift. Historically, students signing up for AP classes have not been required to take the AP test at Webster Groves. That's not always the case in other high schools. If you sign up for the class, you take the test. So that is a discussion in talking with the administrators when that number came up. It was a conversation that we had, and it is going to be a shifting that mindset and culture a little bit, and encouraging students to, like you said, stretch themselves.
Yeah, but I don't want children to be excluded from taking it class they're interested in because they know they're going to take the test, they don't take it again. But at the same time, let's try to sort of say, look, it's, you know, try to do it, but we'll try to help you, and let's try to make it wherever we can the norm that they do it. Do everything we can to help them do it.
Yeah, I'm just going to reserve my comments to the end, but
I'm incapable of showing the discipline. You show all the time. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But while we're talking about this, that's an important thing, finding that balance there. But at the same time, if a student's really signing up for an AP class, there's an expectation of an AP exam at the end. And you know, we do have dual credit classes. But as I look at this, and I do see my words, horrific U.S. history scoring and number of students that take that when you compare it to calculus AD. I don't know how much has to do with, I'm going to get into this a lot, the staff number or the pace of the course or all of the above, or the number of students that are taking the class or the number of sections that a class is going. I think a lot of those factors engage in that.
I think a lot of the students think between taking the AP test and taking dual credit, the dual credit for sure, and the AP test isn't, so they're encouraged.
And I agree with dual credit because you get the, your
Well,
college
I think that's part
university.
of why they're still taking the AP, because
Right.
they're dual credit, because you're insured with it.
So perhaps for next year, it would be useful if we could get that additional, rather than our sort of making guesses here, we could get that additional information.
I can speak from experience, I've been taking the course and I apologize. Okay. I can speak from experience, I'm taking the course and my teacher did tell us to do one or the other, basically. He said that either we were going to do dual enrollment or we would do taking the AP test, and it was an option, it wasn't a we should do both. And so a lot of people chose to do dual enrollment.
If I was given the option, I would do dual enrollment too. And I'm wondering whether the option should be given or how that balances given to the students. And maybe there needs to be a discussion with parents on that and postgraduates and et cetera like that.
You know the comparable cost, I think dual credit, so that for $300 and the AP test is $35.
I don't think it's quite 300 actually. It's lower, it's under 200.
I was thinking 95. I was thinking 95, but it's under that.
So there is, some budget concerns, I think, on that.
I think the risk is that more people will accept your AP score than accept your credit.
So, 3 on his math, and it wasn't good enough for Mizzou, but it would have been good enough for Durham.
So contrary to what I would have expected the answer to be there.
Yeah.
No, not knocking Mizzou,
But it is, saying that just a 3 is good enough might not indicate that they'll actually get there.
So along those lines, we had 43% of our students who took a dual credit course. This year, we had an increase in the opportunities, so we have 43 possible dual credit courses that students can choose from throughout the course catalog. So you can see, again, similarly, we have 53% of students in some sort of weighted class, and 25% of our African American students in a weighted class. That is definitely an area of growth that we need to continue to focus on, finding those opportunities. The next several slides will be focusing on the NWEA data for kindergarten through 6th grade. Some of it will be last year's data for growth for the last year, and some of it will look at cohort data, so groups of students moving forward. So this shows the overall beginning, so the light orange and the darker orange. The light orange is fall, the darker orange is spring. So the overall year growth within the different grades that were given the assessment last year for math. And then this shows the overall growth for the different grades for reading. Then looking at cohort, because we added into the testing pool this year for 6th grade. So looking at our current 1st grade, so and this is fall to fall comparison, so the light orange represents their fall score in the kindergarten year, and the dark orange is the fall score of their 1st grade year. So you can see the cohort of students in their growth for math, and then again for reading. These next slides look at the gender differences. And again, this is just our fall benchmark. So this is this year's first benchmark, and you'll see that the first line shows the overall achievement, and then you have your female achievement and male achievement for the different grades of testing. This one is for math. And you'll see there's not very big discrepancies, only by a few points on any given grade. And then this, and then this looks at the cohort growth for math. So again, looking at year to year, fall to fall achievement. And not many large discrepancies. And then going into reading. This is just the fall benchmark for this year. And then cohort data based on gender from fall of last year to fall of this year. Now, looking at the data when we break the students down by race ethnicity, what you'll see is that our African American students and our students who identify as multiracial are coming in with a gap from our overall total and our white students and our Hispanic students. And that gap continues going through school. So whereas the gap is there, we have work to do as a district to focus on, especially in that early years intervention, to try and close that gap early on, because that's the most crucial time to try and close that information, that instructional gap. So looking at that, and then there wasn't an easy way to put this in a graph, so I created a chart, but this shows you a little bit more. This is the cohort growth from fall to fall for the different breakdowns. And what's interesting is when you're looking at some of our achievement, especially our African American and our multiracial subgroups, in some of our grades, there's actually the growth outpaced our white students, but because that initial gap was there, that it was just never closed. So the achievement, once they got into school, was at some case on pace or even greater than our white students, but it's so crucial that we work on that gap when they come to school, so that kindergarten, first grade interventions are what's so crucial. So you see that in math. And you'll see it in reading here in a second. And the same gap exists when I'm talking about reading.
For the previous information, kindergarten was included with everything that.
Well, this is cohort. So this is cohort data. So the current first grade, that fall of 2016, that would be the score that they achieved when they were in kindergarten. So it's fall to fall. So it's that same group of kids. So you can do that comparison in that direction as well. But you see the same gap when you go forward in reading. And then that same trend, especially in some of our kind of middle upper grades, you'll see that the pace is either equal to or right with the growth of our white students, but we just have to work on getting that gap closed early when they come into school. The next couple of slides talk about our special groups. So those students who receive ELL services or receive free and reduced lunch, have a 504, have an IEP, or are in the gifted program. And you can see the differences in achievement for the students in those groups. One thing I want to make sure that you're aware of is that for our ELL and our 504 students, the number of students is very small. So whenever you have a small number, just be aware of that when looking at that overall data for those subgroups. Just look at that information with caution. So this is the overall, this is just the fall benchmark, but then you see the cohort growth from fall to fall for those different groups. And then looking at the same information for reading. And the cohort fall to fall for reading as well. Continuing in elementary, this year we changed our guided reading level expectations for the 17-18 school year. So this information is a little skewed. If we were using our old level, guided reading levels, we would have seen 87% of our students who were meeting end of year guided reading levels. But because we changed our expectations and made them more rigorous, we aligned that to our new expectations. So this shows that we have 80% of our students meeting end-of-year guided reading levels. So I brought this up to show you a comparison. On the left, you'll see the old guided reading levels. On the right are the new guided reading levels. Just to explain on the different grade levels, except for kindergarten, the first line is considered the light gray line at the top indicates that the level of the student is exceeding grade level expectations. The white row is the expected grade level expectation. The darker gray below that indicates the levels that denote that a student is approaching grade level. They're not quite at grade level, but they're less than a year below grade level. And then the bottom line, the black line, indicates that the student is one or more grade levels below grade level expectations. So if the student tests in those different guided reading levels, that shows you where they are in correspondence to the time of the year and what is considered grade level expectations. So if you compare the guided reading levels on the left to the ones on the right, you'll see that they're more rigorous, the ones, and that's more aligned to the Lucy Coughlin's units of study, reading and writing that we're implementing throughout the district. We had an increase in the number of science fair projects this year from previous years, over double. Had 120 science fair projects. Those were individual projects, and most of those were with individual students. We did have some projects that were completed in pairs or groups of 3, but 120 projects overall. In 17, 26 went on to the St. Louis Science Fair, and 17 received blue ribbons. Moving to the high school, we've had an increase in the percentage of students who participate in extracurricular activities from a little over 72% to 76% of students at the high school participate in some sort of extracurricular activity. And looking at our African American participation, we have a little over 64% of our African American students who are involved in some sort of activity at the high school. And studies show that if students are involved in high school activities, they do better academically in school. And you'll see that coming up. So we have our GPA comparison for students involved in activities versus those who aren't involved in activities. So you'll see the difference there. And then comparing the GPA of our African American students, those students who are involved in activities versus those who are not. Our attendance rates are higher for students, and that goes to what I talked about earlier when we said we have to have our students have a connection with school. If they have a connection with school, the attendance will improve, academic achievement will improve. So attendance rates for students who are involved in activities versus those who aren't overall, and then again for our African American students. Anybody have any questions?
I appreciate Dr. Dembo actually answered some questions I had asked for earlier in the day. And I appreciate that because I know that was a little cumbersome probably for you to get that information. But just to make some points with you all and to really kind of focus some things. In looking at the, some of these may go back to some slides here. That the upper level classes that students take at the high school level, I know unless sometimes there's an encouragement by teachers and or counselors, and parents many times push that, but many times I think teachers may be a little reticent to jump on board with something like that, and I don't want our counseling staff, I'm not saying they're doing this, but I don't want them to dismiss a student's desire to make their academic progress better or try something new. So I think there needs to be a lot of encouragement for the upper level classes, and maybe some discussion even down to the middle school and speaker about that, because that kind of prompts the algebra and that prompts the foreign language forward a little bit.
One of the things that is coming up, I'm working with Angela. We're trying to get a meeting scheduled. We're thinking it'll be probably the day we come back from winter break. We're hoping for that day or sometime soon, with the department chairs at the high school, the counseling staff, or some of the members of the counseling staff at the high school, and working with the administration at Hickson when we're talking about making those initial recommendations for classes moving into the 9th grade, because some of those decisions that can impact what a student takes as a senior really starts when they're in middle school.
Right.
And so making sure that everybody is on the same page and that we're looking at that through a fresh lens of equity to make sure that we're giving equal access to all of our students.
I'm glad that discussion's going to take place. And I'm glad to see that the principals and teachers are, and then you can elaborate on this, about NWP data and the skills checklist, the skills navigator, exactly what are they going to see, what are they not going to see, and how's that training going?
We had initial training probably about mid-fall, and we've had quite a few of our schools start that process. What that does is, so the information that I gave you is the benchmark. So that benchmark is given 3 times a year. What Skills Checklist and Skills Navigator does is takes that information and really drills it down into more specific skill sets, skill deficits, so that teachers can focus in on very specific areas. So rather than saying a student doesn't understand, say, place value, that it will drill it down, saying that they really have a hard time understanding, the tens place or the ones place, and it gives that more specific information. So the teachers are giving those assessments. They're quick, they're short, and they're able to help remediate some of those skill deficits with their students to help, and then they can progress monitor that in a quick manner versus in the past, maybe some interventions were put in place that were much too broad. So if a student had, for instance, problems with decoding, there's a lot of things that go into decoding. So this allows the teachers to really narrow down what specifically the students need to work on. And so that process has been in place. Tim and I have gone and met with quite a few grade levels at all the elementary schools. We've got more coming up after the break to train them. We had a leadership team that was trained, but now we're going down into the building levels and training grade levels and seeing them, implementing them, and helping them with that process.
Have they been surprised to see the level of detail and maybe or how those other teaching can be impacted by that?
What they're surprised is, I think the level of detail is the most surprising for some of the teachers when looking at the data. We're still in the process, like I said at the beginning. We had a meeting a week ago with the principals when we talked about instruction and the RTI process and interventions. And out of that conversation was really the discussion. The initial goal was to talk about that intervention RTI process. What came out of it was we first need to start working on that data-driven decision-making, especially at the Tier 1 core basic instruction. And out of that came the commitment to go through the PLC process. So there's so much of this that's all kind of interwoven, a lot of work going in several different directions, because we have to focus on Tier 1, but we need to work on the interventions for our students as well.
And that marries up very well with PLC. Mm-hmm. That is like a right hand, left hand doing this. That's good. Is it possible to, this kind of goes back to the PE, on the systemic racism, to offer that to this group here? And I would even, this may be stepping way into it, encourage the city to be involved in that particular workshop also. Because I think the more people that can have an exposure to understanding the intricacies and the depth of systemic racism will have a better, will open their eyes. So if that can be made available to us, and if we make that available and offer that to the city, and they can take it or leave it however they want to do it, I think we could highly encourage that.
We talked about that in a recent meeting, because I was approached with a suggestion of the board do some of that training, and I think the issue was that it was a multiple day. And so I believe that option is available, it's just a question of whether or not we want to.
Yeah, it's a 3-day, well, you know, there's a lot of different equity and social justice training around. The one that is provided through Crossroads, we are meeting Dr. Fields in the audience with his handsome young son there. But we are going to be talking about that at Crossroads. But the opportunity exists, but it is a 3-day. So I think it's certainly something that we can collaborate. I think that's a great idea. But is there a 3-day stretch, you know, weekend and a bonus day or something when you would be available? Or do we, there are a lot of local groups too that do professional development. Do we do something different within a shorter time frame? So that exists, and that's something we can talk about at our board retreat when we really kind of dive into equity and some of the different things related to equity.
On the, I appreciate your patience. This is really important. And I know it's important to you too. I just have a little more. On the ELA data, math in 2017, the percentage of advanced proficient for our African American students, you know, I guess it's appalling to me. And we really need to keep that at the forefront of what's going on. And I think we hit the nail on the head that when you look at the progress that is made from year to year, it's not because kids are not lacking, but they're lacking when they come into school. And so what can we do to catch them up in the early elementary grades, and especially in elementary school? Because that is evidenced then in high school results when you look at GPA and when you look at some other things. So if we can get them, I sense that, and I may be wrong on this, I sense the high schools has a lot of things pushing forward for that, but elementary is not pushing as hard and as fast in that particular area. That's just an observation based on not a lot of data.
I think I believe and I know that there's work being done at all levels. I really do believe that. The thing that we need to focus on right now is, or one of the things, is that early intervention in kindergarten and first grade, and really trying to find that balance between, you know, the philosophical, there's different ways, there's different philosophical schools of thought as far as what does early learning look like. And so we don't want to extinguish the joy and the playfulness of early learning, but also really how can we do that in such a way that we're meeting the needs of our kids and trying to close those gaps early on so those gaps don't maintain, because you're right, it will just continue to be there, in some cases grow, and now you've impacted them all the way through school.
And I would like to see that, if, you know, we've talked about encouraging teachers of color to be in grades, every grade if possible. I know Dr. Wiley's working on that, one of the goals. But if we could actually have that happen in K and 1 and make sure that those teachers really understand, and I know they do, but to re-emphasize to them the importance of what they do on a daily basis. You know, first grade teachers are heroes, in my opinion.
And I just want to add to this conversation, maybe not tonight, but I don't want this one to get lost, but I think the discussion of preschool needs to be included in this. We can't expect to fix a gap that exists when a kid gets to kindergarten. We have got to do more prior to that time, and that has been a priority of the board. It was a priority of the board several years ago, and it comes out by the wayside, and I think all of this points to the need to revisit that issue.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things, and Chris highlighted some of it tonight, is how are we vetting, and we're moving in this direction, you referenced Dr. Wiley, but how are we vetting the systems of the organization for equity? Because you could have like the greatest teaching strategy, but if I'm a child and I don't show up and you don't demonstrate that you value me, that you see me, and how you speak to me, what you expect of me, what the environment that I'm in, well, I don't care what you do. And so there's so many different facets to it. So it's much more complex than let's just look at an intervention, or let's just look at data. So we're trying to, again, find high yield strategies or different things that work, that aren't just curricular, but certainly rooted, that are curricular, to try to move the needle. And we're trying to do that intentionally. So I'm optimistic about our efforts, and we need to see our efforts reflected in all the different assessments.
No, I think intentionally is exactly the way it needs to be, and I would hope that all staff are intentional in seeing the need for students who come into their classroom who are students of color in kindergarten or first grade and realize, okay, game's on. It's on for everybody, but especially for those kids. And they need some extra assistance, which goes to the attendance thing. I looked at this and I've always wondered this in my career, especially when Desi labeled this for one of the APR things on the 90% students. If you realize that students go to school 176 days, and this is the percentage of students attending school at least 90% of the time, 90% of 176 days is 167 days. So that's 9 days of absence. And you can't be absent 9 days in your job and expect to do a good job. And if you're learning, that's tough. And I'm not complaining to us. I'm just making the point here. And when you look at the data here, that our African American students' attendance was 85.3% of the students attended at least 90% of the time. That means almost 15% didn't attend at least 90% of the time. Okay? And then you look at our poverty group, 82% and 90% of the time. That means 18% didn't have that. So they had even more than 9 days of absence. And if you're not in school, you're not learning. Granted, I understand there are situations where kids are sick or there are family emergency kinds of things. I understand that. But this translates to me then back into academics, back into GPA, back into being involved in school. And Dr. Simpson, what he talked about, I'm welcome when I come in. Well, if you're not here all the time, we did that 2 weeks ago. I understand staff reaches frustration, and I reach frustration with that. But that's a big thing. We need to be on attendance of kids and why they're not at school.
One of the things I started this year, just as an FYI, is Chris and I have really collaborated. I think I shared with you on a spreadsheet for all the kids that our children of college, specifically our African American students from kindergarten through 12th grade, that includes all kinds of data points that are both academic, disciplinary, attendance, and stuff like that. And what I'll do on a monthly basis is I send to the schools a report on students' absences and ask them different questions about different students. And again, the schools are on that, but I think it's just something highlighting the importance of if you're not here, you're not learning, kind of like you're saying. So, just as an FYI.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I just don't want, and it's easy to get tied to the office. It's hard to really put an intervention in a kid's life. It takes deliberate effort and intentional effort. And I know they're busy. And I think I have just a couple more minutes, and then I'll be quiet. The number of, I know Dr. Denbo gave me this number, the number of African American students for a free reduced lunch, because I think it's important to understand the number and also percentage of the number, what a number of kids we talk about. And Dave brought that up about how many kids are involved in this AP class or whatever. It's important. It would be nice if we could get numbers on some of those things.
Yeah, so just as a point of reference, we have 383 out of 605 of our African American students receive free reduced lunch meals. So that's a 63%. And we have 382 out of 666 students receiving free and reduced lunch who are African American. So that's 57%. So those, looking at it both, in both manners.
And lastly, we talked about science fair. I think a lot of people want to do science fair. I think it helps science, helps understand science. The participation in activities rate for African American students, I'm wondering if there's any transportation issues related to that. I know we've talked about sometimes about running an activities bus. And also, if you mentioned this too, an invitation to be involved in an activity at the high school level. That maybe if another student invited another student or a faculty member who's in charge of that invited students to that, they feel welcome to come versus, well, I'm not going to go to that group because it's whatever, or I'm not going to go because I don't have a ride, or those are factors that play in, and if we can eliminate those factors and involve more students, we see that the achievement goes up because of that. So it's just some thoughts there. And I want to thank you for your report and this going on every other month. And I just want to thank you for that we do this every other month. That is really important for you. Thank you, Board, for listening.
One question, are we looking at the placement process for middle school now? How they get into?
Yes.
So there's that basis, so one of that's
Yes. Let me gather my thoughts here. We're changing that this year. And so we're opening up the POP process completely. I'd be happy at a future board meeting, I can outline, and I don't want to get all the details wrong, but we opened it up. Susan Bergman and great Dr. Lee and I have talked about that. So again, that's another example of eliminating some of those walls. And so it's really going to open up the math enrollment at the middle school in a multiple different ways. So I'll talk about that maybe at our equity board retreat.
I had a question concerning dyslexia assistance. Basically just through questions, what do we have in place now and what's the goal and how does this do, what does it look like first in getting the assistance? What do you have?
So right now, we don't have, dyslexia is not recognized by the state of Missouri as a disability. So students, a separate disability. So they don't receive services through special school district. So special school district doesn't recognize. So with this legislation, that opens it up. And so we will be, what we do know is we will be screening all of our kindergarten through third grade students every year. There's still talk on how to screen, at least initially, our older students to make sure that someone who's maybe going through and is older, who might be struggling, to see if we can provide services for them. And so part of that training is what I highlighted in the professional development. Our reading specialists are going, it's pretty intensive, 4 or 5 day training that will be held here in town in February, and where it talks about how to instruct students really on a very foundational level. A lot of times students can't distinguish between sounds. Some people think dyslexia means reading and flipping of letters, but there's a whole variety of things that can really show up for students who are identified as dyslexic. So breaking it down and very specifically on foundational skills and that professional development will provide the training that our reading teachers will need to help provide that support.
For our high school courses, of course, we reading is national English. Are they getting that training as well?
Part of the legislation is that all of our staff, K through 12, regardless of what you teach, will have to go through mandatory yearly training around dyslexia. So that is part of that process. And part of the process we're looking at implementing also for all of our staff is conducting a dyslexia simulation to try and help build some of that empathy for our staff. It really shows how kids with dyslexia struggle and how exhausted they are after, at the end of the day, when they go through this simulation. So that's part of what we're looking at for next year. So.
I just want to thank you for the cohort data. I think it's so important to make sure every grade is progressing. Any problems there? Very helpful.
And I'm going to follow up with a kind of unclear me question. I tried to answer myself, and of course I got asked. To me, the obvious missing information for is comparing Western Road to other high school students. And I guess my question is, one, do we care? And I think the answer to that probably has to be yes to some extent, but I guess I'm just curious, are there other things that we see districts doing, particularly in the area of post achievement gap, that we can learn from? Are we, to what extent is that important to you all as an administration? I know it's important to a lot of community members. I'm not making feelings about it personally, but I'm just interested in your take.
I think where we're moving towards the data-driven decision-making for professional learning communities and building that structure for our administrative staff and for our teaching staff, where they're really looking at data. I think that is where we will help bridge some of that gap and move some of our scores in comparison. So I do think it's important. I don't want to rest everything on it. Again, it's trying to find that balance. But that, to me, where I've talked to my colleagues in other districts, really teaching our staff to look at data, how to utilize that to inform their instruction and help, and so they can change it to meet the needs of kids, but also to help the students who are struggling or who are on the other end of the spectrum, that they're doing well and they need to be enriched and pushed. I think those two things will help move the needle, so to speak, as Dr. Simpson said.
I just want to say too, and that's one of the things, is there's so many different ways to assess. And, we don't throw out a lot of comparisons, and what we've noticed and what you can see in the data is when you look at we haven't been a heavy map-focused district, and we probably aren't going to be. It's all about the learning. Learning should be reflected. But when you look at our ACT comparatively to a lot of the school districts who sometimes do better or often have done better to us in math, we're typically right with them or even above them, and so, we don't broadcast that. We don't say that a lot. And so maybe we need to do that. Some of what we're doing, we had made the decision 2 years ago. We had all of, like Chris has shared, I think, another report, that we had a lot of our freshmen that were taking our end of course exams. Where a lot of the other local school districts, it's like they're juniors, where they are not taking they're taking the algebra exam after the algebra 2, and because we didn't want to say, well, we have to be able to beat Kirkwood, or we have to be able to beat Lindbergh, we're just going to have, if we think this is the best course sequence, we'll keep it the best course sequence. And so while the decision isn't solely because we want to improve our scores, by shifting the government scores until later, by shifting some of the math, we should see with more mature students with more content knowledge, better performance on those assessments, as well as it, also aligning with our curriculum. So I don't know if that answers or just contributes, but just for your information.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, this time we have our second opportunity for public comment. Anyone like to make a comment?
Hello, I'm Christine Keller. I live at 604 Alameda in Webster Groves. And as you likely know, there have been scribbled several swastikas, the N-word, KKK, a crossed out Star of David, and these have been seen and reported in Webster Groves High School. And in fact, my daughter, in the first week of school, saw and recorded 2 of these examples of hate speech. She photographed another example last week, and she is but one of 1,400 students, which indicates to me that the problem is much bigger than what was reported in the Webster-Kirkwood Times. And let's be clear, these aren't just isolated incidents. The Southern Poverty Law Center's Teaching Tolerance wrote in October that there had been a dramatic uptick in reported hate speech at schools in our nation. Hate speech harms those it targets, but it also provides an opportunity to support the creation of a stronger community, and it allows us to develop a better understanding of our shared history and humanity. Please, use this as an opportunity for Webster Grove School District to demonstrate true leadership as an example to other schools in our region, to ask tough questions and listen for solutions that allow us to create a culture and a climate where every student feels like they belong, and yes, from respect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I'd love to applaud what Christine said. I agree wholeheartedly. My name is Keita Quinn. I am a resident of Rock Hill. I am an alumni of Webster Groves. I graduated in 1985. My mom graduated from Douglas. As you can tell, we have deep roots here in the Webster Groves School District. I have a junior at the zoo, I think about this, an 8th grader at Hickson, a 6th grader at Steger, and a 4th grader at computer school. I serve on the PTO as an equity officer at computer school. I also participate in the Alliance for Interracial Dignity, the Equity in Education group, the Webster Equity Bridge group. As you can know, equity is a passion of mine. I stand here really just to announce that I will be filing to run for school board tomorrow. I look forward to meeting everybody and to talking with everyone and hopefully working with the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I am not filing for school board.
But I'm really excited, Keita, that you are. And I also very much I'm grateful for Christine's statement. Thank you so much for that. I am here tonight, I'm sorry, Elissa Sullivan, I live at 229 Garish. I am here tonight wearing my hat as a member of the Coordinators Council for the Alliance for Interracial Dignity. And I want to invite you all to an upcoming community conversation we're going to be having with the Alliance in the city of Webster Groves. It'll be on Wednesday, January 24th at 7 o'clock at the Webster Groves Library. The community conversation is going to be about policing and public safety. And particularly we need representatives of our education community to be there because Maslow helps us understand that students can't learn and achieve to their potential. They don't feel safe. And we want to make sure that our students' needs and concerns are considered by the community in this forum. Specifically, this is going to address the funds raised by Prop P in St. Louis County that was voted in last April. Retroactively, there's been some concerns in the larger community across St. Louis County that voters didn't completely understand all the nuances of the proposition. There were two things here in Webster that happened together, Prop P and Prop R. And the St. Louis County Council passed a resolution in August asking various municipalities to please find some way of hearing the will of the people to make sure that voters' intentions were honored. And Webster Groves is going to see a little over $1 million per year from this. And people have some different ideas about what they were actually voting for. So the Alliance stepped forward to partner with the city of Webster Groves to create an opportunity to have this community conversation, to ask for people's
comments, insights, ideas, expertise on the subject. And like I mentioned, I think it's really important that we have members from our education community there, you all as representatives. And it's another nice connection to the city for the school district to really just wrap around and hear all the different voices in of our students and families. So again, that's on Wednesday, January 24th, 7 o'clock at the Webster Groves Library. And what did I forget? Oh, yes, we have flyers.
Other public comment?
Hi, I'm Laura Percelli. I live at 736 Fairview. I'm part of the Avery community. My youngest is a high schooler, a senior, so I don't have long in the district, but I will still live here and be a citizen. And I have nothing prepared. I wasn't going to speak, but after listening and seeing and looking at data, I'm so impressed at how we do as a district and getting data and talking about, moving our scores up and all that stuff. It's fabulous. I want every kid to feel safe, and we all do. And kids aren't going to learn if they don't feel safe. And if there are things being downplayed, brushed under the carpet, and not intentionally, but we're a great district and we want to be portrayed as such, they're not going to feel safe, and they won't learn in a district they don't feel safe. So I would encourage, I know it might take 3 days, 4 days of your time, please do the racial equity training. Please don't worry about how much time. It's so important. That's it. Good evening. I'm Sarah Unsicker. I live at 5008 Exeter Avenue. I did not come planning to comment tonight, but I wanted to address some concerns as a parent of an Afton student. You talked about the achievement gap quite a bit, and I wanted to recommend that you utilize parents as teachers and put some emphasis on that, because I believe developing relationships with parents early on will help with student attendance, will help close that achievement gap, and will help develop relationships between the parents and the school district. There are different resources you can utilize to help parents participate in parents as teachers, such as the St. Louis Diaper Bank, that can help parents welcome the parent educators into their homes. And I believe utilizing parents as teachers would really help with the achievement gap. Thank you.
So you're out there having social All right, if not, then I need a motion to
I move that we approve consent agenda items 7.01, 7.02, 7.03, 7.04, 7.05, 7.06, 7.07, 7.08, and 7.09.
Sure. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn.
What are we doing?
I'll second.
All those in favor?